The massive doors to the Vorthak throne room opened with a sound like thunder. Every head in the great hall turned toward the entrance. What they saw made no sense at all. A single human walked through the doorway. Captain Kim Tae stepped into the most dangerous place in the galaxy. His boots made soft sounds on the smooth crystal floor. The throne room was huge, bigger than 3 football fields. The ceiling reached so high that clouds could form up there. Everything was made of black and purple crystal that seemed to glow. From within, hundreds of Vorthak warriors lined the walls. They were tall beings, much taller than humans. Their skin looked like snake scales, but changed colors based on how they felt. Right now, most of them showed deep red scales. That meant anger and confusion. Each warrior held weapons that could cut through steel like paper. Their eyes followed Kim Tae as he walked forward. Many of them had never seen a living human before. They had only heard stories about these strange beings who fought so hard in space battles. But this human was not what they expected. Kim Tae wore no armor. He carried no weapons. His uniform was clean and simple, dark blue with silver buttons. In his arms he held something that made every Vorthak in the room stare in wonder. A blanket. It was not a special blanket. It looked old and worn. Someone had sewn it by hand with thread that did not match. There were patches of different colors where holes had been fixed. It was the kind of blanket a child might love, not something a warrior would carry into battle. The Vorthak court whispered among themselves in their clicking language. What kind of trick was this? What weapon could be hidden in such a thing? Why would a human come here alone? At the far end of the hall sat Emperor Valdris on his throne of black stone. He was the largest Vorthak anyone had ever seen. His scales were so dark they looked almost black, but they shifted to deep purple when he was thinking hard. His eyes were golden and ancient. He had ruled the Vorthak Empire for over 200 years. The Emperor watched Kim Tae walk toward him. Each step echoed in the silence. The human showed no fear, but he also showed no anger. His face was calm, like someone going to visit an old friend. Kim Tae stopped at the exact distance that Vorthak law required. He had studied their customs during his long journey here. He knew that to step closer without permission would mean instant death. He also knew that to show the wrong kind of respect could be seen as an insult. The human bowed low, holding the blanket carefully so it would not touch the floor. When he straightened up, he looked directly at the Emperor. This was also dangerous. Many species were not allowed to look at Vorthak royalty, but Kim Tae was not just any human. He was a captain in the Human Federation Navy. He had fought in 12 major battles against the Vorthak fleet. He had destroyed 6 of their warships and helped save thousands of human lives. Every Vorthak in this room knew his name. They also knew he should be their prisoner or their enemy. He should not be standing here as a guest. Your Imperial Majesty, Kim Tae said in perfect Vorthak language. His voice was clear and strong, but not loud. I come not as a warrior, but as a father who has lost everything. The Emperor's scales shifted from dark purple to bright orange. This was a color that meant complete surprise. No human had ever spoken to him in his own language before. No human had ever called themselves a father in his presence. I seek to prevent others from sharing the same grief that has filled my heart, Kim Tae continued. I come hoping that wisdom might succeed where weapons have failed. A sound like wind through leaves filled the hall. It was the sound of hundreds of Vorthak all holding their breath at the same time. The Emperor's personal guards moved their hands to their weapons, but they did not draw them. They were waiting for orders. Empress Saren, who sat on a smaller throne beside her mate, leaned forward. Her scales showed the silver-blue color of intense curiosity. She had never heard a human speak with such respect and sadness. You dare enter our sacred space, Emperor Valdris said, his voice deep as rolling thunder. You dare speak of grief to those whose children you have killed in your wars? Yes, Your Majesty, Kim Tae replied without hesitation. I dare because I understand that grief. I dare because I have learned that we are not so different as we believed. The Emperor stood up from his throne. This was something that rarely happened. When the ruler of the Vorthak Empire stood, it meant something important was about to occur. Every being in the hall felt the weight of this moment. "Human," the Emperor said, "you have traveled across the galaxy to stand in this place. You carry no weapons, you speak our language, you claim to understand our pain." His golden eyes fixed on the blanket in Kim Tae's arms. "What is this thing you hold?" Kim Tae lifted the blanket slightly, showing it with the care someone might show a precious jewel. "This belonged to my daughter, Your Majesty. Her name was Lee So. She was 7 years old when she died in this war." The throne room became so quiet that Kim Tae could hear his own heartbeat. The Emperor's scales shifted again, this time to a color none of his court had seen before. It was deep blue mixed with silver, the color of profound sadness mixed with respect. "She made me promise something before she died," Kim Tae said, his voice becoming softer, but still clear enough for everyone to hear. "She made me promise to give this blanket to someone who was cold and scared. She believed that warmth could make anyone feel better no matter who they were or where they came from." Emperor Valdris took a step down from his throne platform. Then another. The court watched in amazement as their ruler descended toward the human, each step deliberate and careful. "You would give this sacred thing to your enemies?" the Emperor asked. "I would give it to another parent who understands loss," Kim Tae replied, "because that is what my daughter would have wanted." The Emperor stopped just outside the traditional meeting distance. His scales now showed the deep gold color that meant he was making a decision that would change everything. The war between humans and Vorthak had lasted 3 years. Millions had died on both sides. No one expected it to end in a throne room with a conversation about a child's blanket. But sometimes the most important moments begin in the most unexpected ways. Kim Tae took a deep breath and began to speak. His words carried across the silent throne room like ripples on still water. Every Vorthak in the hall listened, even though they did not want to care about human problems. "My daughter, So was born, on Haven Prime," Kim Tae said. "It was a small colony world where humans grew food for other planets. The weather was always warm, and the sky was purple because of the twin suns." He held the blanket closer to his chest as he spoke. So loved that world. She would run through the grain fields and chase the flying creatures we called sky dancers. They looked like your moths but glowed with soft light. She tried to catch them, but they were too fast. She would laugh and say she would build wings someday to fly with them. Emperor Valdris remained standing, his scales still showing the deep, gold color of important decisions. But something else was happening. Small flecks of silver began to appear in the gold. Silver meant memory and sadness mixed together. "When So was 5 years old, she found an injured sky dancer," Kim Tae continued. "Its wing was torn and it could not fly. She brought it home and cared for it. She made a small bed from one of her socks and fed it sugar water from a tiny spoon." Some of the Vorthak warriors shifted uncomfortably. They did not expect to hear about human children caring for small creatures. In their minds, humans were cold fighters who only cared about winning battles. "She named the sky dancer Bright," Kim Tae said. "Every morning she would check on it and talk to it. She told it stories about her day and sang it the songs I taught her. For 3 weeks she cared for that tiny creature." Empress Saren found herself leaning forward on her throne. Her own scales showed pale blue, the color of gentle interest. She had children of her own, though they were grown now. She remembered how young ones always wanted to help hurt animals. One morning, So came running to me with tears in her eyes, Kim Tae said. Bright had died during the night. She asked me why good things had to die. I did not know what to tell her. The Emperor's golden eyes focused intently on the human. This was not the kind of story he expected from an enemy soldier. Where was the talk of weapons and battle plans? Where was the anger and hatred he had always seen in human communications? So made me help her bury Bright under her favorite tree, Kim Tae continued. She picked flowers to put on the small grave. Then she said something I will never forget. She said that Bright was not really gone because the love they shared would always be alive somewhere. Several of the younger Vorthak in the court exchanged glances. Their own children had said similar things when pets died or when grandparents passed away. They began to realize that maybe human children were not so different from Vorthak children. When the war started, So was 6 years old, Kim Tae said, his voice becoming quieter. She did not understand why ships were fighting in the sky above Haven Prime. She would point at the flashes of light and ask if they were new stars being born. The Emperor took another step closer. This broke all rules of court behavior. But no one dared to speak. The ruler of the Vorthak Empire was doing something that had never happened before. He was choosing to hear an enemy's story. I tried to explain war to a 6-year-old child, Kim Tae said. I told her that sometimes people who did not know each other got scared and angry. She asked me why they did not just talk to each other like she did when she had problems with her friends. A soft sound came from somewhere in the court. It was barely a whisper, but it sounded like someone agreeing. The Emperor's head turned slightly toward the sound, then back to Kim Tae. So always believed that talking could fix anything, Kim Tae said. When the older children were mean to her, she would sit with them and ask about their families. She would share her lunch with anyone who looked hungry. She made friends with children who spoke different languages by drawing pictures in the dirt. The human captain's voice grew stronger as he continued. She could not understand why the star people, as she called your race, were angry with humans. She would ask me what we had done wrong. She wanted to send you letters to say she was sorry. Emperor Valdris felt something he had not experienced in many years. It was a feeling he remembered from when his own children were small. It was the wonder of seeing the world through innocent eyes before war and politics made everything complicated. When the bombardments got closer to our city, we had to move to the underground shelters, Kim Tae said. So was scared of the dark tunnels, but she tried to be brave. She would sing songs to the younger children to help them sleep. He held up the blanket so everyone could see it better. This blanket was her most precious thing. Her grandmother made it for her when she was born. So would wrap it around herself when she was scared or sad. She said it made her feel safe because it smelled like love. The Empress stood up from her throne. This was unprecedented. Never before had both rulers stood at the same time for anyone except other royalty. But she found herself unable to remain seated while hearing about a child who faced death with such courage. In the shelters, So would share her blanket with other children who were crying, Kim Tae said. Even though she was scared too, she would wrap it around someone smaller and tell them stories until they fell asleep. She would sit in the cold and shiver, but she never complained. The Emperor's scales began to show new colors. The gold was still there, but now it mixed with deep purple and silver. It was a combination that meant he was feeling many strong emotions at once. The night before she died, So called me to her bed, Kim Tae said. The bombing was very close and we both knew our time was short. She made me promise that if something happened to her, I would give her blanket to someone who needed comfort. Kim Tae's voice broke slightly, but he continued. She said that being warm and safe was the best feeling in the world. She wanted someone else to feel that way, even if she could not. The throne room was completely silent except for the sound of Kim Tae's words. Even the guards had stopped shifting their positions. Everyone was listening to the story of a human child who faced death by thinking about how to help others. So, died the next morning when a missile hit our shelter, Kim Tae said simply. She was holding my hand and asking me to sing her favorite song. Her last words were about this blanket. She made me promise one more time to find someone who needed it. Emperor Valdris looked at the simple, patched blanket with completely different eyes. It was not just fabric anymore. It was the final gift of a child who had chosen love over fear, even at the end of her short life. The Emperor realized that everything he thought he knew about humans might be wrong. Kim Tae stood quietly for a moment, letting the story of his daughter settle in the minds of everyone present. Then he did something that shocked the entire Vorthak court. He began to speak about their own culture in their own language, using words that only scholars knew. Your Majesty, Kim Tae said, during my journey to your homeworld I studied the ancient Vorthak texts. I learned about the concept of Theranal, the sacred bond between parent and child that connects all living things. Emperor Valdris stepped back as if Kim Tae had struck him. Theranal was not a word that outsiders were supposed to know. It was one of the most sacred concepts in Vorthak society. The Emperor's scales flashed bright orange again, but this time it was mixed with confusion. I read the poems of Zen Karlak, who wrote about losing his son in the great storm of Vorthak Prime 300 years ago. Kimte continued. He wrote that grief was like a second heartbeat, always there, always reminding you of love that continues even after death. Several members of the court made soft clicking sounds with their tongues. This was how Vorthak showed deep surprise. How did this human know about Zen Karlak? His poems were taught only to Vorthak children in their most advanced classes. I also studied the philosophy of wise Mira, who taught that understanding comes not from sharing the same experiences, but from recognizing the same feelings in different experiences. Kimte said. She wrote that a mother's love for her child is the same whether that mother has scales, fur, or skin. Empress Saren stood up straighter on her throne. Wise Mira was her ancestor, a great philosopher who had lived over 500 years ago. How could this human know such things? More importantly, how could he speak about them with such respect and understanding? I learned that Vorthak parents sing to their children just like human parents do, Kimte said. I learned that you tell stories about brave heroes and kind helpers to teach lessons about right and wrong. I learned that when a Vorthak child dies, their parents plant a tree so that life continues in a new form. The Emperor's scales began to show a color that his court had rarely seen. It was deep silver mixed with gold, the color of profound respect, mixed with sorrow. Kimte was not just speaking about Vorthak culture. He was showing that he understood it in his heart. Most importantly, Your Majesty, Kimte said, his voice becoming even softer, I learned that you too have lost a child in this war. The entire throne room went dead silent. Even the sound of breathing seemed to stop. Speaking about the Emperor's dead son was something that could mean instant death. But Kimte continued, his voice full of genuine sadness. Prince Valorian was 19 years old when he died defending the outer colonies at Proxima Kepler, Kimte said. The reports say he stayed behind to help evacuate civilian ships when our fleets attacked. He could have escaped, but he chose to save others instead. Emperor Valdris made a sound that was part growl and part sob. His massive hands gripped the arms of his throne so hard that the stone began to crack. But he did not order Kimte to stop speaking. I read the memorial stone that your people carved for him, Kimte continued. It says that he died with honor, protecting those who could not protect themselves. It says that his spirit lives on in every act of courage and kindness. The Emperor's scales shifted to pure silver now, the color of deepest mourning. Several members of the court had never seen their ruler show such emotion. Some of them began to realize that their emperor was not just a powerful leader, but also a father who missed his child. Your Majesty, Kimte said, I cannot imagine the weight of losing a child while also leading an entire empire. I cannot imagine making decisions about war while grieving for your son. But I understand the pain that never goes away, the empty space that no amount of time can fill. Kimte took a small step forward, still holding the blanket carefully. I understand because I wake up every morning, and for just a moment, I forget that So is gone. I start to call her name to wake her up for breakfast, then I remember and the pain hits me all over again. Emperor Valdris descended 2 more steps from his throne. He was now closer to Kimte than any non-Vorthak had ever been allowed to come. The guards tensed, but they did not move. They could see that their emperor was making a choice that would change everything. I understand because I still set aside her favorite food when I eat, even though she is not there to share it, Kimte continued. I understand because I keep her drawings on my wall and her toys on her bed, as if she might come home at any moment. The Empress made a soft sound that was almost like crying. She remembered doing the same things when Prince Valorian died. She had kept his room exactly as he left it for months, hoping somehow that he would return. I understand because I dream about her every night, Kimte said. In my dreams she is still alive and laughing. She tells me about her day and asks me to read her stories. When I wake up, I have to remember all over again that she is gone. Emperor Valdris was now only 3 steps away from Kimte. His golden eyes were fixed on the human's face, searching for any sign of deception or manipulation. but all he saw was the same pain he carried in his own heart. "But I also understand something else, Your Majesty," Kim Tae said. "Prince Valorian and my daughter. So never met each other, but they both died trying to help others. They both chose love over fear, even when it cost them their lives. In that way, they were not so different." The Emperor's scales began to show new colors that his court had never seen before. Gold and silver swirled together with deep blue and bright white. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like watching a storm and a sunrise happen together. "Your son died saving Vorthak civilians from human weapons," Kim Tae said. "My daughter died dreaming of sending letters to Vorthak children to say she was sorry for the war. They were on opposite sides of a conflict, but they had the same heart." Kim Tae lifted the blanket slightly, showing its worn fabric and careful patches. "So asked me to give this to someone who was cold and scared. She did not say it had to be a human. She just said someone who needed comfort." The Emperor looked at the blanket, then at Kim Tae, then back at the blanket. For the first time since the war began, he was seeing a human, not as an enemy, but as another parent who understood loss. Prince Valorian used to say that the strongest warriors were those who fought to protect, not to destroy, the Emperor said quietly. He believed that true strength came from choosing to help others even when it was difficult. Kim Tae nodded. So used to say that everyone was just scared inside, and that being kind was the best way to help people feel better. She thought that if everyone was kind to each other, there would be no reason to fight. The Emperor's scales shifted again, this time to the deep gold that meant he was making a decision that would affect the entire empire. He looked around at his court, at the warriors who had served him for decades, at his wife who understood his pain. Then he looked back at Kim Tae and the simple blanket that had traveled across the galaxy carrying the love of a dead child. "Human," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast throne room. "You have done something that no weapon could do. You have made me see my enemy as my equal." The Emperor descended the final steps and stood directly in front of Kim Tae. Two fathers, from different worlds and different species, united by the same grief and the same love for children who would never come home. "What you offer is more precious than any treasure in my empire," the Emperor said. "But do you truly understand what you ask of me?" Kim Tae looked into the Emperor's golden eyes and saw something that surprised him. He saw fear. Not the fear of death or defeat, but the fear of hope. The fear that comes when someone offers you exactly what you need most, but are afraid to accept. "Your Majesty," Kim Tae said softly, "I understand that accepting this gift would create a bond between us. I studied the ancient laws of your people. I know that when a Vorthak accepts something precious from someone who has lost a child, it creates a debt that can never be repaid with money or favors." The Emperor's scales flickered between gold and silver. Kim Tae was right. The law of Theranol was clear. To accept such a gift would mean that the Emperor owed this human something more valuable than his empire. "I know that it would mean you could never again see humans as just enemies," Kim Tae continued. "I know that it would change everything between our peoples. But I also know that my daughter would want this blanket to bring peace, not more war." Kim Tae began to unfold the blanket. As he did, everyone in the throne room could see it more clearly. It was even more obviously handmade than they had first thought. The stitching was crooked in places, done by small fingers that were still learning. Some patches had been sewn on with different colored thread, as if whoever made it had run out of the right color and used whatever they could find. But there was something else about the blanket that made everyone stare. Despite being old and patched, it had been cared for with incredible love. Every stitch, every patch, every worn spot told a story of a child who treasured this simple thing above all others. "She made some of these patches herself," Kim Tae said, pointing to a section where the stitching was particularly uneven. "When she was 6, she spilled juice on her blanket and was so upset. She thought she had ruined it forever. Her grandmother taught her how to sew a patch over the stain." He touched another spot where a small piece of bright yellow fabric had been carefully sewn in place. This patch came from her favorite dress, the one she wore on her 7th birthday. When the dress got too small, she cut out a piece to add to her blanket so she could keep it with her always. Emperor Valdris stared at the blanket with growing wonder. In Vorthak culture, items that carried such personal history were considered sacred. They believed that objects could hold the love and memories of those who treasured them. So was so proud of learning to sew, Kim Tae said. She would show everyone her patches and explain where each piece of fabric came from. She said her blanket was like a map of all her favorite things. The emperor extended one massive hand toward the blanket, then stopped. His scales were cycling through colors so quickly that his court could barely keep track. Gold, to silver, to deep blue, to bright, white and back again. He was feeling more emotions at once than he had ever experienced. She slept with this blanket every single night of her life, Kim Tae said. When she had bad dreams, she would wrap it around herself and the nightmares would go away. When she was sick, she would curl up in it and feel better. When she was happy, she would dance around the room with it flying behind her like a cape. Kim Tae held the blanket out toward the emperor, offering it with both hands. The night before she died, she wrapped this around both of us as we sat in the shelter. She said that as long as we were together under her blanket, nothing bad could really hurt us. The emperor's breathing became heavy and slow. Every instinct told him to step back, to reject this gift, to maintain the distance between enemy species. But something stronger was pulling him forward, something he had not felt since his own son died. She made me promise that whoever received this blanket would know that it came with love, Kim Tae said. She said that love was the only thing that could make someone feel truly warm, no matter how cold the world became. The emperor looked around his throne room. He saw his warriors, his advisors, his wife. All of them were watching him make the most important decision of his reign. He could reject the gift and continue the war. He could maintain his pride and his anger. He could keep seeing humans as monsters who deserved to be destroyed, or he could accept the blanket and everything it represented. In your culture, Kim Tae said, his voice barely above a whisper, there is a saying, Vorthak du Theranal com Astaran. Love shared is love multiplied. So believed the same thing, even though she never heard those words. The emperor's eyes widened. That phrase was from the most sacred Vorthak texts, words that were only spoken during the most important ceremonies. Hearing it from a human, spoken, with perfect pronunciation and deep understanding, shook him to his core. Your son, Prince Valorian, lived by those words, Kim Tae said. The survivors from Proxima Kepler said he told them that helping others was the only way to honor the love his parents had given him. He said that love had to keep moving forward or it would die with the person who carried it. Emperor Valdris felt tears forming in his golden eyes. Vorthak rarely cried, and an emperor had never been seen crying in public before. But the weight of his son's memory, combined with the simple truth of Kim Tae's words, was too much to bear. Alone. My daughter and your son never met, Kim Tae said, but they understood the same truth. They understood that the best way to honor love is to give it away. The emperor reached out with both hands and gently took the blanket from Kim Tae. The moment his claws touched the soft fabric, he felt something he had not expected. Warmth. Not just physical warmth, but the warmth that comes from being understood, from being seen not as a monster or an enemy, but as a parent who missed his child. The blanket was so small in his massive hands, it would barely cover one of his arms. But as he held it, he felt connected to something larger than himself. He felt connected to every parent who had ever lost a child, every person who had ever chosen love over hate, every being who had ever tried to make the world a little bit warmer for someone else. This blanket, the emperor said, his voice shaking, it carries the love of your daughter. Yes, Kim Tae said simply. And now it carries the hope that love can be stronger than war. The emperor looked at Kim Tae, then at the blanket, then at his assembled court. Every face was turned toward him, waiting to see what their leader would choose. Would he choose the path of continued war and hatred? Or would he choose the path that a human child and a Vorthak prince had both tried to show them? Emperor Valdris raised the blanket and draped it carefully around his shoulders. It looked impossibly small on his massive frame, but he wore it with the dignity he might have shown the most precious royal robes in his treasury. The moment the blanket settled around his shoulders, something changed in the throne room. The air itself seemed different, charged with possibility and hope. Every being present knew they were witnessing something that would be remembered for generations. "Captain Kim Tae of the Human Federation," the Emperor said, his voice now strong and clear. "I accept this gift in the name of all parents who have lost children to this war. I accept it in memory of your daughter, So, and my son Valorian. I accept it as a promise that their deaths will not be meaningless." The Emperor turned to face his court, the small blanket still draped around his massive shoulders like a symbol of something greater than any crown or scepter. "Let it be known throughout the Empire," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall, "that on this day we have learned that our enemies are not monsters, but parents who love their children just as we love ours." Kim Tae stood quietly, watching as the most powerful being in the Vorthak Empire wore his daughter's blanket with pride and declared an end to everything that had separated their peoples. The human had walked into the enemy's throne room carrying a blanket instead of a blade, and in doing so had won the most important victory of the war. Emperor Valdris stood in the center of his throne room wearing a human child's blanket like the most precious royal robe ever made. The sight was so unexpected that many of his court members had to blink several times to make sure they were not dreaming. The Emperor's scales had settled into a color none of them had ever seen before. It was deep gold mixed with silver and blue, all swirling together like liquid starlight. It was the color of profound change, of decisions that would echo through history. "Send word to Admiral Korvac immediately," the Emperor commanded. His voice carried the absolute authority that had ruled an empire for 2 centuries, but now it also carried something new: hope. A young messenger stepped forward, his own scales flickering with nervous energy. "Your Majesty, what message should I send?" The Emperor adjusted the small blanket on his shoulders with careful hands. "Tell him to order all Vorthak fleets to cease fire immediately. Tell him that any ship commander who fires on human vessels after this moment will answer to me personally." The messenger's scales turned bright white with shock. Ceasing fire meant stopping the war. It meant changing everything that had driven their empire for the past 3 years. "Your Majesty," the messenger said carefully, "Admiral Korvac will ask for the reason." "What should I tell him?" Emperor Valdris looked at Kim Tae, who still stood quietly in front of the throne. The human had not moved since offering the blanket. He waited patiently, like someone who had done what he came to do and was now ready to accept whatever happened next. "Tell Admiral Korvac that we have been fighting the wrong war," the Emperor said. "Tell him that we thought we were fighting monsters, but we have learned we were fighting other parents who love their children just as much as we love ours." The messenger nodded and hurried away to send the message. Within minutes, communication signals would race across the galaxy to every Vorthak battle fleet. The war would begin to end with simple words carried by radio waves, but the Emperor was not finished. He turned to face his assembled court, making sure every advisor, every general, every noble could see him clearly. "For 3 years, we have told ourselves that humans were different from us," he said. "We said they were cold beings who felt no love, no grief, no joy. We said they were machines that looked like living creatures but had no souls." Some of the older advisors shifted uncomfortably. They had been the ones who created those stories about humans. They had encouraged the Emperor to see the enemy as less than real people. "We were wrong," the Emperor continued. "Captain Kim Tae has shown us that humans feel the same pain we feel when they lose their children. They sing the same songs to comfort scared little ones. They make the same promises to protect those they love." He touched the blanket gently, with one massive hand. "This simple piece of fabric has taught me more about our enemy than all our intelligence reports combined. It has shown me that there is no real difference between a human parent's love and a Vorthak parent's love." Empress Saren stood up from her throne and walked to her husband's side. Her scales showed the deep blue of strong agreement mixed with pride. She had watched her mate make the hardest decision of his life, and she supported him completely. "The child who owned this blanket," the Emperor said, "spent her last days trying to comfort others who were afraid. She shared her most precious possession with children who had nothing. She died thinking about how she could make someone else feel better. He looked directly at Kim Tae. Captain, your daughter was braver than most of my warriors. She faced death by choosing to spread comfort instead of fear. She is worthy of the highest honors in any culture. Kim Tae's eyes filled with tears. To hear his little, so praised by the leader of her enemies, was something he had never imagined possible. Prince Valorian did the same thing, Kim Tae said quietly. When your son could have escaped the battle at Proxima Kepler, he stayed to help evacuate civilian ships. He saved over 300 Vorthak families before he died. The Emperor nodded slowly. My son and your daughter never met, but they both understood the same truth. They understood that helping others is more important than helping yourself. The Emperor turned to address his entire court once more. From this day forward, humans will no longer be our enemies. They will be our partners in building a galaxy where children like So and Valorian can grow up without fear. A general near the back of the hall stepped forward. His scales showed the dark red of concern mixed with confusion. Your Majesty, what about our colonies that were destroyed? What about our people who died in human attacks? The Emperor's expression became serious, but not angry. General Thaxon, those losses were real, and the grief is real. But continuing, this war will not bring back the dead. It will only create more Sos and more Valorians who die before they can live full lives. He gestured toward Kim Tae. This human could have come here seeking revenge for his daughter's death. Instead, he came seeking peace. He offers us the chance to honor our lost children by making sure no more children have to die. General Thaxon's scales shifted from red to orange, showing that he was thinking hard about the Emperor's words. Finally, he bowed his head in acceptance. There will be difficulties, the Emperor continued. There will be people on both sides who do not want peace. There will be those who say we are weak for ending the war this way, but they will be wrong. The Emperor's voice grew stronger as he spoke. It takes no strength to continue fighting. Any fool can pull a trigger or launch a missile, but it takes true courage to put down your weapons and try to understand your enemy's pain. He looked around the room, making eye contact with every important member of his court. We will work with the Human Federation to build something better than what we had before. We will create trade agreements that benefit both our peoples. We will share knowledge that can help everyone live better lives. Kim Tae stepped forward slightly. Your Majesty, there will be humans who resist peace as well. There are those who have lost too much to forgive easily. But I believe that most of my people want the same thing your people want. They want their children to be safe and happy. The Emperor smiled, an expression that looked strange on his reptilian features, but somehow felt completely natural. Then, we will work together to convince them. We will show them that former enemies can become friends when they realize they share the same hopes. A soft chime sounded through the throne room. It was the signal that a message had arrived from the fleet. Everyone turned to look as the same young messenger returned, moving much faster than before. Your Majesty, the messenger said, slightly out of breath. Admiral Korvac confirms that all fleets have received the ceasefire order. He also reports that human ships have stopped firing as well. He says it is as if both sides were waiting for permission to stop fighting. The Emperor's scales brightened to pure gold, the color of joy and satisfaction. Perhaps they were waiting. Perhaps everyone was tired of a war that served no purpose except to create more orphans. Kim Tae felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had been carrying since So died. The war that had taken his daughter was finally over. Her blanket had accomplished what no weapon could achieve. Captain Kim Tae, the Emperor said formally, you came here as an enemy, but you leave as a friend. You brought us a gift that was worth more than any treasure. You have given us the chance to honor our dead children by protecting the living ones. Kim Tae bowed deeply. Your Majesty, my daughter, So would be happy to know that her blanket helped end the fighting. She always believed that kindness was stronger than anything else. The Emperor carefully removed the blanket from his shoulders and held it with both hands. This blanket will remain in the palace forever. It will remind us that the greatest victories come not from defeating our enemies, but from understanding them He handed the blanket to Empress Saren, who accepted it with the reverence she might show a holy relic. My wife will ensure that the story of So and her blanket is taught to every Vorthak child. They will learn that a human girl taught an entire empire about the power of love. As Kim Tae prepared to leave the throne room, he looked back one more time at the Emperor and Empress. They stood together holding his daughter's blanket, two alien beings who had been transformed by the simple gift of a human child. The human had walked into the enemy's throne room carrying a blanket instead of a blade. He left behind a galaxy where former enemies would work together to build a future worthy of all the children who had died hoping for peace. So's final wish had been fulfilled in ways she could never have imagined. Her blanket had not just brought comfort to someone who was cold and scared. It had brought warmth to an entire galaxy that had been frozen by war and hatred. The greatest victory belonged not to the warriors or the generals, but to a little girl who believed that love could conquer anything. She had been right all along.